Hey, it's Matt from Custom Car Grills with a mesh install for the rear bumper of the 2019 and newer Hyundai Veloster. I'll also be covering an install for the rear reflector area later on as well. To get started, the rear bumper will need to be removed from the car. Linked below will be some pictures of a bumper removal that may help with getting the bumper off of the vehicle. One of the final steps of getting down to the bumper will be to disconnect the license plate harnesses as well as the camera harness. Then there's a push rivet on each side to get the bar released from the bumper. Set this off to the side for now, and then remove any stickers that may be on the back of the bumper where we'll be working. Next, I'll grab some plain old water and a towel. The bumper needs a quick cleaning, because I don't want to deal with a muddy mess in upcoming steps. Just a fast wipe down is all that's really needed. Now, here's a look at how I'm going to accurately cut the holes in the bumper. I've got a set of vinyl templates for the center openings, and I've got some pieces for the outer parts as well, which include a cutout for the tow hook hole. To apply these, I'll get my water bottle out again and mist on some water to give the vinyl something to glide on if repositioning is needed. Then, I'll peel the vinyl sticker off and wet the sticky side so that there's even less of a chance of it prematurely sticking to the bumper. From here, it's just as simple as lining it up and getting it centered. I like doing the outer side with the tow hook in it first because it has the most areas to use as reference for centering. Once I think I have it good, then I'll wipe away any little bit of excess water and double check my work before moving forward. I like using a ruler to verify that the template is equidistant from the bumper crease from top to bottom. From what I recall, I think I had this template about 5/8 of an inch from the crease. On the section next to it, there's a little excess plastic here, so I'll sand that down flat with my rotary tool and sanding drum. Just a little sanding is all that's needed, and then a quick clean off, and from there that should be enough to move on. Like with the other section, I'll wet the area and then peel off the vinyl and wet the sticky side of that too, and then lay it on the back of the bumper. I'll double check the distance from the crease so that it matches the outer piece. And also double check that it's fairly centered from the top and bottom edges. Again, I'll wipe off the excess water in the surrounding area with a towel. One thing to note is that the lower edge of the inner section should be about level with the lower inner tip of the outside piece. Now, I'll quickly do the other side. I can use the side that I did first as reference as to where to get these started. At the end of this, I want the sides to look symmetrical and level, so spending a little extra time doing this step right will pay off when it's finished. If the vinyl pieces needed to be repositioned, that should be easy as long as the surface is sufficiently wet enough for the vinyl to not stick too much. I was fairly meticulous in double checking the spacing to make sure I got all this perfect. After I have the templates good to go, I'll grab a high contrast Sharpie like this silver one. A simple trace around the vinyl template is all that's needed. I'm overlapping onto the vinyl a little bit to make sure that I get a good transfer of the exact outer edge. It's best to make sure that the edge of the vinyl is dry so that the marker doesn't bleed anywhere. Once everything is all traced, then the templates can be removed and thrown away. And after a quick drying with the towel, a nice little cut line should be left. This silver line will be close to the area that I'll be cutting along. And to do the cutting, I'll grab my rotary tool again and equip it with Dremel's number 543 cutting and shaping wheel. Then I'll get to cutting the bumper. It's important to note that I'm cutting on the inside part of the cut line and that I'm staying about a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge. This will give me a nice little buffer to account for any errors that might happen during this step. Once traced all the way around with the cutoff wheel, the plastic piece in the center should lift out fairly easily. Now, I'll trace the rest of the lines with my tool until all 4 sections are done. Some of the angles are not very easy to get to, so a variety of approaches might be needed to get clean cut. The toughest section for me to work on was the one with the tow hook. The standard lines that were on the other sides weren't too bad, but the cuts around the tow hook themselves were challenging. I made a lot of smaller cuts to give it somewhat of a rounded appearance that I'll clean up a little bit later on. There's only one more section left, and while it may be nerve-wracking for some owners, I'm here to say that this is easy to do with the vinyl templates correctly traced out. After the cuts are made, there will be some burnt plastic bits on the edge that should be picked off by hand. Next, I'll use the top of the shaping wheel to shave down and even down the cut edges. Odds are that the first cuts are a pinch wavy, and this is the time to correct any mistakes that were made. Since I left a little material before I got to the silver line, I have some extra material here to use for smoothing out that edge. Once I'm satisfied with the straightened out lines, I'll grab a razor blade. This can be used to trim off any remaining small pieces that might still be attached. Of course, I don't want to dig into the plastic with the blade, I'm just gliding along the edge and not applying much pressure. Then I'll grab some sandpaper, and if a sanding block is available, then it might be a good idea to use that on some of the straight lines. I'll work the big straight edges first, trying to refine the cut line even more with some 180 grit paper. When it comes to the tighter spots, the sandpaper will need to come off the block and be worked over by hand. It's important not to scratch the finished surface, so caution with the high grit paper should be used. Then I'll grab some finer grit papers. I'll be wet sanding these edges with some 400, 600, and 800 grit paper. Using the spray bottle to wet the cut edges and wet the paper directly should be good enough to get this started. There's no need to dig in super hard for this step. The goal is to get a super smooth edge instead of removing a bunch of material. Keeping the paper and edge wet while progressing down to finer grits should help with the whole process. And some areas, such as around the tow hook hole, might need a little bit more attention than other areas. Unfortunately, the plastic used for this bumper is prone to turning white when stressed, so I had a couple areas that didn't sand out to the dark gray plastic that I wanted to see. Using a black oil-based paint pen can help stain the lightened edges dark again. I'm just dabbing the pen on the affected areas and then quickly wiping the pen marks away with a wet towel within a couple seconds of applying it. If done correctly, there should be a nice clean and smooth edge where the cuts were made. I'm super happy with these cuts. Everything looks evenly spaced and symmetrical. The area around the tow hook hole looks surprisingly good now, and if we take a look at the other side of the bumper, that side is also looking really good. This outer opening has some amazingly sharp corners that look ready for our mesh to be installed. Speaking of which, here's a look at the mesh pieces that we have for sale on our website. There's 2 inner pieces and 2 outer pieces. Of course, the one side has a cutout for the tow hook already, so there's no need to worry about that. The inner pieces do need to be bent a little bit, and we'll try and get that started, but the curve is more than likely not going to be perfect right out of the box. There will need to be a little adjustment from the installer to make sure that the curve on the mesh is just right before installation. To give the mesh a little something to attach to, I'll grab some wood rods along with some cable ties and foam. Let's get a closer look at getting the mesh on the back of the bumper. Generally, the mesh should be horizontally centering with the cut line that was made here, and make a mental note of that. To prepare for the wood dowels, I'll take a couple ties and run them horizontally like this so that the loop will allow for wood rods to be fed in vertically. I was able to get these secured with just 2 attachment points, but individual results may vary. To protect the paint of the bumper, I'll put some foam under the dowels before pulling the ties tight. It's important not to pull the ties too tight though. We're just looking to get the mesh flush up against the back of the bumper and hold firmly. After the ties are fastened, the mesh may need to be repositioned a little bit. Again, I'm trying to keep this level with the bumper. When it's all finished, I don't want the mesh to look tilted one way or another. Now, repeat this for the other areas. Of course, make sure that the curve on the mesh for the inner pieces is correct before attempting this. Also, make sure to level it out so that it's straight. Here's a quick look at how this appears from the other side of the bumper. The foam is protecting the paint, and based on the vertical alignment, it looks straight. And horizontally, it's also looking straight, which is great to see. Getting the tow hook area tight might require an extra tie or 2. I popped the tow hook cover out, and then wrapped a tie through the opening and through the mesh to get them paired up tightly. After the pieces are all tied on, then I cut the tail ends of the ties off and threw them away. One thing that I noticed that was happening over time was that these inner pieces were sliding down. To help keep the mesh in place, I inserted a couple small wood dowels at the bottom. This prevented the mesh from sliding down on me and kept it straight as well. Now I'm ready to fasten the mesh on, and to do so I'll grab some automotive goop. This stuff works great, but it does have a long cure time. If the installer has done the front grille pieces that we offer and has any plyo grip left over, then that's a great adhesive to use too that will cure much quicker. Personally, when I'm using the automotive goop, I do like to apply it with a toothpick. This gives me pinpoint accuracy in getting the adhesive right where I want it, which is where the mesh and bumper are making contact. Of course, I'm being extra careful to not spill any automotive goop through the front that could ruin the install. And one of the best pro tips that I can give is to have a fan nearby to blow the goop to keep it from running all over the place. Behind the scenes here, you can see that I've got a little fan going that's propped up and aiming right at the area that I'm working at. Without it, there would be a lot of micromanaging of the adhesive to make sure that it doesn't spill through the front. One of the hardest parts to work on is around that tow hook hole. I was going very light on the goop here because there really wasn't much room to work within. It's also important to understand where the cover connects in and not apply any adhesive in that area. I let this cure for a full 24 hours and then came back the next day and cut off the ties and removed the foam and wood dowels. This rear bumper mesh install is complete. Let's flip it around and see how it turned out. Well, okay, hold on. Let me put this tow hook cover back on. Okay, we're good now. Holy smokes, this looks awesome. The vinyl templates did their job with getting me a super accurate layout of where I need to make the cuts. The mesh is looking horizontally straight, and the parts in the bumper where it curves have the mesh wrapping around perfectly. The tow hook area looks good too, and overall I'm thrilled with how this looks. I'm not done with this bumper yet, and I've got my eyes on this reflector. I'm thinking we can make this look better than that stock one and get some matching mesh in there. To pop out the old reflector piece, a flathead screwdriver and a little bit of muscle can get the job done. I like to use the screwdriver to loosen the plastic retainer behind the clip first. After loosening that part, I'll try to push back the bumper tab and lift the part out. Working on the inner portion first seemed to work best for me, and then I just went around the perimeter until I got the whole part to pop out. Next, I'll clean this up with some glass cleaner and a towel. This area shouldn't be too dirty, but I want a clean surface to work with. For brightly colored paint jobs, I suggest using a rotary tool and sanding drum to remove the paint from the tabs. Overall, this will give a much cleaner look, but please note that I'm only sanding the paint off and I'm doing it very lightly so that I'm not digging into the plastic tabs themselves. Now, let's take a look at the mesh pieces that we have for sale on our website. This is pre-cut and pre-formed specifically for the rear reflectors. Cutouts have been made for the bumper tabs, and let's flip this around to get it installed. The mesh goes on the back of the bumper with the excess bent mesh wrapping around the bumper like so. These are an extremely tight fit. We made these based off of the OEM specs, but because of the shape of this opening, the mesh may feel like it's too big for the opening. I found that getting a side in first and then moving it down was the best approach for me. Lastly, I had to work pretty hard to get that top edge to clip in. While these are pre-formed the best we can, it looks like I needed to do a little adjustment to make sure that the angles were just perfect, especially on this outer edge. A flathead screwdriver can be used to push the mesh in a little bit so that there's good contact with the mesh and bumper. Just like with the other rear bumper mesh install, I'll get some automotive goop out to bond the mesh and bumper. And I'll get a toothpick out so that I can dispense the goop onto it so that I can pinpoint exactly where I want the adhesive to go. Of course, I don't want to apply this too high and have any spill through the front. I'm putting this a little bit below the edge of the bumper where it'll get onto the mesh. This adhesive does take a full day to cure, so plan the install accordingly. With this outer edge, the installer might need to pull the adhesive up a little bit in the valley here. Due to the angle, the goop will not want to adhere to the mesh easily. Behind the scenes here, I do have a fan blowing on this area. Without it, the adhesive can be very runny, and I'm trying to prevent it from going all over the place. I let this sit for a day, and now I'm ready to flip this around and reveal the completed install. Oh wow, this looks great! These new reflector mesh pieces complement the main rear mesh set really well. And wow, this rear set is looking better than ever now. I love this mod. It's important to note that with the rear reflector delete mesh set, a reflector should be on the rear bumper somewhere other than the trunk for safety reasons. A new reflector should be added to the mesh or bumper to keep compliance with local and federal laws. Here's a couple pictures of what this completed bumper looks like after it was put back on the vehicle. Overall, I love how this transforms the look of the car. It's one of the best cosmetic mods that I think owners can do, and it can be easily done on the weekend with some basic tools. Well, that's all I've got for this video. If you have any questions about it, then feel free to contact me, and thanks for watching.